Welcome back to another in our series of great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today comes from the Old Testament prophet Jonah. Jonah chapter 1. Jonah flees from the Lord. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it, to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship, and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish. And they said to one another, Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation, and where do you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you? And he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men were exceedingly afraid, and said to him, What is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then they said to him, What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us? For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. He said to them, Pick me up, and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord, and made vows. And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. I am intrigued by superstitions. In baseball, it is thought to be bad luck to step on the chalk lines as you pass by them going in or out of the field of play. Perfectly intelligent men will go to great lengths to skip over this line so as to not bring down bad luck on them. Crossing the path of a black cat, walking under a ladder, opening an umbrella indoors, rocking an empty rocking chair, stepping on a crack in a sidewalk, breaking a mirror. Are you spooked by these old wives' tales? You'll be none the better if you carry a rabbit's foot. Not so lucky for the rabbit, you know. Or finding a lucky penny, or knocking on wood, or crossing your fingers, or breaking a wishbone for good luck. Funny how these have seeped into our everyday practices and language over the years. But for pure superstition, there are few areas in life that can compare to that of the sailor. It is a wonder any ship ever made a safe voyage, seeing all the traditions that one must perform and practices to do in order to avoid bad luck. If one lost their hat overboard, it was a bad omen. You couldn't cut your nails or trim your beard or hair lest you brought bad luck. Flat-footed people were bad luck. Women on board were bad luck and would anger the sea. No whistling or singing into the wind, or you would bring on a storm. No stirring your tea with a fork or a knife. You guessed it, bad luck. Red-headed people brought bad luck. You couldn't pass a salt directly to another. You must set it down and let them pick it up. On and on it goes. There is a superstition among sailors that comes from the Bible. It is from our chapter today. And in fact, it is called by our author, a Jonah. Someone who brings bad luck to a ship has been called a Jonah. Remember those red-headeds? They were Jonahs. Believe it or not, the clergy were considered to be a Jonah. Once the crew got it in their head that a person was truly a Jonah and in danger of the ship and crew, there was only one way to rid that bad omen. The same way those sailors did in our chapter today, overboard. Watch some of the old sailing movies and you'll see. In fact, if you want a real challenge, read Herman Melville's epic novel, Moby Dick, and count the numerous references and allusions to the Bible, and in particular, the book of Jonah. This isn't our only encounter with Jonah, the prophet, in the Bible, for he is briefly mentioned in 2 Kings 14:25. We read, "He restored the border of Israel from Lebo-Hamath as far as the sea of the Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was from Gath-Hepher." So we can get a timestamp, so to speak, on the date of Jonah. It's about the 8th century BC. Judah, the southern kingdom, and Israel, the northern kingdom, coexist, having split after the death of Solomon about a century and a half before. There are some rather remarkable parts of this prophet's journey that intersect with the New Testament, not the least of which is the numerous references that Jesus makes to Jonah. For we read in Matthew chapter 12, verses 38 through 41, "Then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, 'Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you.' But he answered them, 'An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah the prophet. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will be the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up at judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And behold, something greater than Jonah is here.' And again in Matthew 16, verses 2 through 4. He answered them, 'When it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it, except the sign of Jonah.' So he left them and departed." It is interesting that Jesus uses a familiar phrase from the sailing genre for weather prediction. We now say, "Red sky in morning, sailor take warning. Red sky at night, sailor's delight." But the sign of Jonah is really what Jesus wants them to realize. Another interesting aspect is the intersection of both Jonah and Simon Bar-Jonah at the city of Joppa. Simon Bar-Jonah is the name of Peter the apostle. For in Acts 10, Peter receives a vision that ultimately shows him he must go to the Gentiles with the message of the gospel there at Joppa. Note the reaction in Acts 11 to his mingling with the Gentiles. Acts 11, verses 2 and 3. "So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcision party criticized him, saying, 'You went to uncircumcised men and ate with them?'" Things hadn't changed much as to the attitude of Israel and the Gentiles in the 800 years or so since Jonah. But it is also at Joppa that Jonah seeks to go away from the Gentile race of the Assyrians, choosing to go to Tarshish. In both instances, here in Jonah and in the book of Acts, God is determined that a prophet must go and preach repentance to a nation that is not his chosen people. Both are reluctant, but in the end, both go and both are met with success. Both Gentile groups are enemies of God's people. In fact, the Assyrians would, in a couple of generations, completely destroy the northern kingdom of Israel, and the Roman Empire would soon persecute the new group of believers of the way. In our chapter today, we are quite perplexed at Jonah's desire to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Surely Jonah knew that psalmist words from Psalm 139, verses 7 through 10. "Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me." Years later, Jeremiah would pen similar sentiments from the mind of God in Jeremiah 23 and 24. "Am I a God at hand, declares the Lord, and not a God far away? Can a man hide himself in secret places so that I cannot see him, declares the Lord? Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord?" Yes, our chapter and the entire book of Jonah are filled with lessons to learn. The persistence of God that his message go out. The inability of any to hide from God's presence. But more than these, we must learn the unparalleled mercy of God to those we least expect to be worthy of it. Is there a Nineveh that you might be called to preach? And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the great chapters in the Bible.